I don't believe in the medical community. I don't trust the medical community. So I'm not going to allow them to offer anything to you. So she did not allow me to have medication for my seizures.
Did she not trust the medical system because of her getting the electric shocks?
That was the same year that the CIA admitted to mind control experiments on innocent people. And my mom locked into that.
How did this affect your upbringing and your relationship with your mother?
Oh, goodness.
Today, I'm joined by Marianne Richmond, a best-selling author. In her upcoming memoir, If You Were My Daughter, Marianne shares her powerful personal story of growing up with emotional neglect, navigating a late epilepsy diagnosis, and breaking the cycle of generational trauma. Through her writing and her lived experience, she offers a heartfelt look at healing, resilience, and redefining what it means to be a mother. Enjoy this interview with Marianne Richmond. Marianne, what happened between you and your mother?
That is such an interesting question. I don't think I've ever heard it phrased that way. I think what happened with us is we were parallel people traveling this mother-daughter road together, but we never were able to reach one another, if that makes sense. You know, there on the back of my book jacket, I wrote the book jacket, which is a really helpful exercise for any author to really see, to help them understand what is this story that I'm telling. And so I really like to do my own descriptive copy because it helps me understand what story I'm trying to tell. And I wrote, the stories that we're born into shape the ones we tell about ourselves. And that is what happened between me and my mom. Is my mom had a story going full of her own trauma, that she was in the Air Force prior to me being born. She was a captain in the Air Force, suffering from depression, underwent electroshock therapy, which back in the 50s was really barbaric. There were no muscle relaxers, or it just essentially they were putting seizures through one's body to oust the depression or the mental illness. And for her, that was incredibly traumatizing. And when we think about trauma as being overwhelming helplessness, I think it really helps us understand why certain things feel so traumatic. Is our sense of safety being disrupted? So then I come along 10-ish years later, and I start having full body seizures, crazily enough. Well, instead of my mom's ability to come alongside me, it's almost like my situation exacerbated her trauma and fear. And so she was parenting out of that and wouldn't, well, what do I want to say? Not wouldn't, but put up a, I don't believe in the medical community. I don't trust the medical community. So I'm not going to allow them to offer anything to you. So she did not allow me to have medication for my seizures. I think on some level she believed she caused them. This is all my own understanding growing through this situation. So what she saw as protection, I saw as abandonment. And many of the alternative doctors that she took me to were telling me all sorts of things. I had a pinched nerve. I had a homeopathist tell me I had cerebral allergies. So I was really not allowed to have the very care that I truly needed because of her experience. So what happened between us is I had a traumatized mother parenting a traumatized child. And what I've come to understand is that, we heal by being witnessed by one another. So when there is trauma, what allows trauma to be overcome, to be worked through, to become resilience is the presence of a loving, caring witness who can help us understand our feelings, be present to the feelings and the experience, whatever it is. But without that, I was left to feel alone, unseen, unheard, which then took root in me as my own trauma. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
It makes sense to me,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
It sounds like you inherited her trauma that she had not healed from. And then once she witnessed you experiencing that trauma, it triggered her own trauma, and you
Yes.
were her mirror. And
Yes.
now, she's forced to look at this and even closer. And did she not trust the medical system because of her getting the electric shocks?
Yeah, I want to add a real interesting element to this story for your listeners that okay, so in like 1975, okay, this is going way back, but I was a young girl in the 70s. And that is the year, honestly, that I had my first seizure. So for your listeners, I was what I would call a normal little kid, doing normal little girl things, playing with my Barbie dolls and taking piano lessons. And it was one particular Saturday afternoon on a cold January day in Wisconsin that I felt a pinch in my left pinky that felt like a vibrating, numbing sensation that went through my hand, generalized through my body, and turned into a full body convulsing seizure. That was how this whole thing started. And that experience divided my life into a before and an after. A before feeling normal and an after of the question of what is wrong with me. And I continue to have these, well, my mom called them quote unquote spasms, which completely diminished the experience of a full body collapsing, going unconscious, convulsing on the floor. And I would have these seizures multiple times a week in the beginning. And they dissipated a bit as I got into high school. So I kind of lost my train of thought of where we were going with that. Bring me back, Jessica.
So basically, she did not acknowledge the
Ah,
extent to what
yes,
you were experiencing.
correct. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So 1975, that is when that happened. Well, coincidentally, that was the same year that the CIA admitted to mind control experiments on innocent people. And my mom locked into that. And she believed wholeheartedly that she was a victim of mind control experiments by the CIA. She believed that her electroshock therapy for depression in the Air Force was really this covert operation
Hmm.
conducted by the CIA. And so she clamped onto that narrative for my entire life.
Hmm.
And that was her dominating narrative through which she lived her life. that also made her unable to see any other explanation, to see me as a unique individual who needed very different things. I was like an extension of her trauma, as you said before. And so she just put the kibosh on medication, anticonvulsant medication, things that would have kept me safe in my body, in my life. So when you are growing up in that place of, for me, I didn't know when the next thing could happen. Where am I going to be? Who's going to see me? What's it going to be like? It is like walking around in fight or flight 24/7. It's like my nervous system was just jacked for years and years and years because I could not rest in my body.
Wow. So you're walking around as this little girl, not knowing when you would have a seizure next.
Correct. Yeah. Is it going to be at school? Is it going to be at prom? Is it going to be when I'm kissing my boyfriend? And I didn't tell anybody either. So when we feel unseen and we don't have someone to witness us saying, I believe you, I see you, that's traumatic. I understand why you're scared. Then shame takes root. It must be my problem. Or I'm afraid to tell anybody because I'm not getting that mirroring that lets me know it's valid. So I started, I would hide, so all my seizures started in my left pinky, which was a clue, but a terrifying clue, because I had about 30 seconds to know if it was going to travel up my arm. Sometimes they would stay in my hand, like the numbness would subside, but I didn't know that either. So if I felt the pinch, then I had about 30 seconds of waiting to see. And I would usually try to run and hide. I try to find a bathroom stall, but maybe an empty room of some sort that I could escape to.
Mm.
Yeah, so I just was too ashamed to even tell anyone I had this thing because I didn't know how to explain it.
How did this affect your upbringing and your relationship with your mother?
Oh, goodness. I had a deep, deep inner loneliness growing up. And it was exacerbated by our family dynamic. I had two older brothers, 2 and 3 years older than me. And my father was, he was there, but not there. He was profoundly hard of hearing. He lost his hearing when he was 20 due to a nerve loss, just genetic, really, and started wearing hearing aids when he was young, like 20. And that, his own helplessness caused him to become unavailable as well. I mean, he physically couldn't hear, and so he was a bit shut down. So my mom, it was clearly a mom and I problem. He wasn't involved. He was doing his kind of the culture of maybe the 70s where the dad was the breadwinner and he would go off to work and come home and want his recliner and the newspaper. And my brothers were just doing their own thing too. So this wasn't a family problem. My mom was very vocal about not liking the role of being a mother and wife. Like that was another element of the soup, if you will, where she would verbally say that, I never wanted to be a mother. I never wanted to be a wife. And we're all like, okay, well, here we are. So because of that, she didn't cultivate a familial spirit in the home. It was almost 5 people fending for themselves. So you ask about the experience. It was lonely. I really felt like everything was up to me to figure out. Yeah.
Almost like you didn't have a mom.
Yeah. No, I mean, if we think about, a woman who reviewed my memoir, her name is Kelly McDaniel, and she wrote a book called Mother Hunger. And I really had connected with her. I saw her speak actually in Nashville. And the subtitle of her book is, well, it's geared toward adult daughters, missing guidance, nurturing, and protection. That's the 3 elements that Kelly has identified as what we need for that secure attachment to be developed as young people. That is our model, that our mother is our first model of that. Mostly. Yes, a father can be that too, but primarily it's the mother. And if I look at those 3, guidance, protection, and nurturing, yeah, that's a no, no, no. That's a no, no, no. So yeah, I did not feel mothered in the sense of the word.
I want to dive a little deeper into generational trauma
Yeah.
and how that's inherited and passed on through generations. How would you define generational trauma?
Yeah, that is a great question. My my own understanding or how I've come to know it. And I actually just completed a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. I graduated about a year ago because I did really want to better understand how our brains and our bodies hold on to these stories. I mean, it's one thing to write them out, but it's another to understand how they take root in us. And there's so much research around how before we are even born, like when we are developing in a mother's womb and body, and her emotional state, whether it's depression or anxiety or the state of her nervous system, is we absorb that stress. We absorb those stress hormones. When we are in the fight or flight, and our bodies are pumping out that cortisol, we are absorbing that as infants so that we can arrive on this planet already in a state of stress, which is mind-blowing to me.
It is.
Yeah. And so when I think about generational trauma, I think of the before, the chapters before. I look at my mom's story, being born to immigrant parents. So my mom's parents came over from Lithuania through New York's Ellis Island with nothing. They were poor, poor, poor. My grandfather washed dishes for a quarter a week, 25 cents a week he was making. And my grandmother was washing clothes at a laundry. This is just 2 generations ago. Like, I'm not talking about the 1700s. I'm like, these are my grandparents and trying to provide for their 3 children. Okay, stress. I mean, gosh, right there, I'm getting stressed thinking about that. And then my mom is born into this family where no one's speaking English, and she's trying to make her way as a young girl who is of very little means. And her brother has a paper stand on the corner in Philadelphia, and so he becomes the breadwinner for the family and puts my mom through college. She enters the Air Force to try to make a regular income for herself after being a secretary. She gets married, goes through depression. I come along. It's like you can just feel the layers of generational stress and trauma. And yeah, so it's a passing along um, of the wounds that we inherit through no fault of our own. And I want to stress that too. You know, my mom used to say, "Oh, I did the best I could." And as a kid, I was like, "Well, it's not good enough." You know, I
Mm,
just felt so angry about that.
mhm.
It's like, well, couldn't you do better? Um,
Have you forgiven her?
I have. I have. And I was listening to I think it was a reverend. I was sitting in a church pew. I've sat in a lot of church pews in my life. And he said to forgiveness can happen in an instant, but to feel forgiveness takes time. And I really resonated with that because what allowed me to finally forgive my mother was exactly what we're talking about. And it was diving into her backstory. You know, I took a trip to Philadelphia. I walked the streets that she walked. I visited her homes. Some of them weren't standing, but I stood on the streets. I looked up her addresses. I imagined life in the 30s, in this poverty laden area of Philadelphia. And it is that extension of empathy that understanding can cultivate empathy, which then allows us to trade some of that condemnation for compassion. So that grip of like bitterness for what she did or didn't do softened into, okay, I understand. I just still don't like it.
Mhm.
I still wish it was different,
Mhm.
but I'm able to track her story and feel compassion for her, which I then think allows us to forgive. There's a quote in the beginning of my book that says, "Forgiveness costs us our story." Forgiveness costs us our story. And I heard that sitting in another church pew somewhere. And that one really, I wrote it down. I remember that. I was like, oh, that's good. Because when we do choose to forgive, we cannot tell our narrative the same way.
Mhm.
You know, what I was telling as a victim, you know, she did this to me. There was bitterness, there was anger. How could she? How could she abandon me like that?
Mhm.
And you trade that for, hmm, yeah, I see this now. She was parenting out of her own fear, her own trauma. Yeah, that makes more sense now. It's a
Yeah,
gentler position.
you lose the hero, victim, antagonist, protagonist of the story, and now you're taking on responsibility. And yeah, it's like you're rewriting your story.
Completely.
Mhm.
Which is what you know, I'm a longtime children's author, putting into words, putting into the world all these books of love and courage and belonging. And it was such a healing part of my own narrative. And it changed. You know, I feel like my beginning books were ones that felt more, wouldn't it be great if? Writing the words I longed to believe for myself. Like I'll write about love. I'll write about I love you, how much, so much, how much is so, way, way more than you know. I'll write that, but I'm not sure if I believe that's how someone could love me. I can love my kids that way, but I'm not sure if I could be loved that way. And it was throughout my own therapy of understanding exactly what you just said, rewriting that narrative, getting off the victim rescuer positioning, that my book started taking on in myself that what I was offering was from a place of overflow. Like my therapist said, are you giving from lack or overflow? I was like, oh, that's good too. So I've seen my own work moved from a place of embodiment versus aspiration, and believing that the things I'm writing now are true about myself as well.
Do you think forgiving your mother was necessary to heal?
You have wonderful questions. It was necessary for me. It was necessary for me to the loosen the grip that her role had on my psyche, if you will. I felt it was a trade. It allowed me to trade bitterness for a self-reclamation in my spirit. I have worked with other clients through my mental health journey. They're not there yet. They're not, and I don't know if they will ever be. The grip is still pretty strong. One of the things that helped me so much was, you and I are talking about narrative, and in the narrative therapy world, I think Michael White, I have that right, was one of the founders of narrative therapy. And he has a line in there of, the person isn't the problem is the problem. And to me, that is such a pivotal viewpoint, because what it's saying is you're able to separate your worth as a human, your inherent goodness, from your circumstances. And for a long time, I just collapsed those two. My circumstances, I made a commentary on my worth. I pieced together my worth based on the worst of what happened to me. And that her doings or not doings means I am unworthy of love. That's what I concluded. And when you take that truth and that belief out into the workplace, into friendship, into romance, it's not great. It's not great. You don't believe that you have needs, or you believe you have needs, but you're not allowed to express them. It manifests as a lot of trust issues, being slow to trust, not believing someone would actually want to be with you. So when that idea of separating our worth from our circumstances was pivotal to my healing. To believe I have always been okay. I have always been of value. And I was raised by an emotionally unavailable woman. And that distance, that externalizing, is what can help us do the work of healing, in my experience.
Well said. You became a mother yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Have you detected anything in your children that could have been a pattern or any type of trauma that was passed on from you or from your mother?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The pendulum of motherhood for me has swung wildly. And when I first became a mother, I believe I can say that it was from a longing to create something different, more so than a desire to be a mother. I don't know if that makes sense. It wasn't from a longing of, I want to be a mother. It was more of a longing of, I want to create a different family experience. And there's a little nuance there, because I didn't look at the role of mothering as something that was aspirational. It didn't look great. And so the decision was one of, oh, do I want this? Do I not? Do I really want the family, but do I really want to be a mother? Ugh. So clearly I have 4 children now and made that decision. But my early mothering was me going way overboard. I am going to be the most present. I am going to let them know that they are the most important, the most valued, the most. Well, that is a recipe for complete codependency and exhaustion. I have no needs. All their needs come first. That's how it started. And again, as my therapy journey continued, and I was able to reclaim more of myself, more of my value, more of the right to have needs and express them, I chilled out. Chilled out a bit. And it was okay to have periods of rest and boredom and times when I wasn't going to be what I felt I needed to be, this super mom figure. That is not what my kids need or want. They need me, a present, embodied mother. But you asked about what I see in my kids. When I think of the 4 of them, I see in 2 of them an anxiety that's humming below the surface. And I can't help but feel that perhaps that was inherited from me, because that is not my husband. He is very, very steady, very optimistic. And I see myself in some of my children, but I also feel like I have the tools now to come alongside them and talk with them. What does that feel like in your body? Yeah, just use some of the tools that I've gained to help them.
It's really interesting how that works when it comes to our relationships and our upbringing, because it's like, if, like with you, you wanted to become what you didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was the same way. She had a pretty absent, emotionally unavailable mother. And so she became just this unconditional, loving mom who, not unlike you, kind of, neglected her own needs and kind of disregarded any type of, like, doesn't even really know the word boundaries. And it's
Oh, yeah, kindred spirit. What's a boundary? Yeah, I'm sad because you're sad. I'm not a separate individual.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting how those ties work and how we
Oh,
want to become the thing that we never got and needed and wanted so deeply.
oh, 100%. But being what we didn't get does not mean being this selfless doormat either.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I think, how we take it to that becomes the what we didn't get. It's like, no, because that doesn't serve anyone either.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're modeling that we're, that our soul mothering purpose is to, like you mentioned, just take care of everyone's needs at the expense of ourselves. I mean, oh my gosh, Christmas. And, there's a part in my memoir where, I mean, it's a little tongue in cheek in the writing, but it's not too far off. When my husband was going off to work and I was like, okay, let's make a list of what we all do. And I was like, me, planning birthday parties, buying Christmas presents, buying birthday presents, mailing your mom a Mother's Day card, changing the sheets on the bed. And then it said, you mow the lawn. And he's like, well, that's not fair. And it's like, well, I'm not sure how far off that is. That mothers have taken over all the emotional labor in the family. And that perpetuates today still for working mothers, that we are carrying that emotional labor for our families and not saying enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And what happens there too is you're teaching your children that that's how you love. So it's like my mom taught me, not knowingly, but that you love other people by putting them first and that you always come last. And so I thought I was a people pleaser, but really this is just how I learned how to love. Like, aren't you more important than me?
Yes. Yes. When I was in therapy for quite a few years in my kind of mid 30s, 40s, my therapist had so many nuggets that I just wanted to tattoo down my arms and foreheads that I'd have them at the ready. And she said, when you can't, well, a couple that were like, ooh, she said, when you can't trust yourself, everybody else better be right. And when they're not, huge betrayal and resentment. And that was a big, ooh, yeah. Because when you can't trust yourself, you rely on everybody else's knowing. You give it away. You give away your own power to choose. But that concept of self-trust is born when we're little people, in the secure attachment that we are hoping to form as little people with that first caregiver who recognizes, that little kid states a need. Oh, I'm hungry. And the caregiver says, well, oh, you're hungry. Of course you are. It's been 5 hours since you've had something. Well, let's get you something to eat. And that little kid knows, oh, I know what it feels like to have a need. I can state my need. Someone hears it and they come alongside to accept that. And then they learn that they have a voice and they take that out as they grow. But, in my case, and for many people, that earliest expression of self-trust, when I started having my health issues, telling these doctors and my mother, there is something deeply wrong with me, and getting dismissed. Oh, it's just this. Or I did have one doctor tell me it was psychosomatic, that I was using it for attention. Okay, well, the trust I had in my own knowing and my own voice was squished. So you take that into adulthood and you don't trust yourself, and we give that decision-making power away. And so part of the work of healing is how do you come back to knowing yourself? Like, what does that even mean? How do you know you're doing it? And that's the invitation to connect with what I call like your three centers of knowing. You've got your head, that you're thinking, and your feelings, and then your body wisdom. And to check in with those places for congruency. Because a lot of, honestly, the beliefs are the most untrustworthy because of that stuff we're talking about, of how we arrive at these core beliefs. I am unworthy of love. If that's leading the way. And it's our bodies that often hold the truth.
100%.
The clenching of our stomach, or the peaceful openness. What does yes feel like in your body? What is your truest yes feel like? And similarly, what does no feel like in your body? For so long, I was so disconnected to my body because it was the enemy, truly. It was doing things that I couldn't control. Then I tried to starve it because then I would have control. So at least I could be skinny while I was having seizures. And then I had a couple miscarriages, and it was disappointing me in yet another way. So to believe it had anything of value to give me was a foreign concept for a long time.
How can we arrive at a place where we can confidently trust ourselves?
Practice. I think, when I'm working with clients, we often start with, what is a time that you can recall that was a full body yes in your life? Sometimes they have to think really hard to go back to one. It's like, oh, well, when I decided to take, I'm just gonna come up with something, that mosaic class that I enrolled in. As soon as I saw that listing being offered to me, I just immediately signed up. Okay, well, what was that? Try to describe that feeling. Well, I heard a yes. I felt excited. That's the feeling I had, was excitement and kind of joy. And then my stomach felt like kind of butterflies. It's like, okay, well, that's what yes felt like in my body. Or think of a time when you got invited to something and immediately your stomach was like, I don't like those people. I don't like all the noise. And you felt it, but maybe your brain overrode it and said, yeah, but if I don't go, I'll probably never get invited again. If I don't go, they're going to be disappointed. And yet here's your body clenching its no. So I think it's practice. It's getting to know our internal language. Oftentimes when I'm writing and I'm struggling with what the heck I'm trying to say, like, I know what I'm trying to convey, but I can't get it into words, I will close my eyes and I will ask myself a question, and I will write it with my eyes closed. Whatever I hear. And yes, the writing will be crooked and on the page, kind of illegible, but it will be so truthful. It will be an answer that has come from somewhere really deep. And there's something about shutting out all the visual stimuli and just settling into my deepest self that unlocks a truth that sometimes I'm not able to access in any other way.
A couple of things that have been helpful for me, because I'm probably in the past, I won't claim it now, but I have been the most indecisive person I know. And yeah, you too. So one thing that has helped me is I've heard this somewhere, if you need to talk yourself into it, then it's a no. And if you need to talk yourself out of it, then it's a yes. And also, if
Yeah,
it's
that's
not a
so,
heck yes, it's a no.
oh my gosh. Okay, see, I need to put that on a Post-it note
Mhm.
in addition to the 25 other ones I have. That is so true. And I can think of 3 examples of things right now that I keep saying, to myself, oh, should I have done that? Should I have said no? Maybe I should have said yes. Second guessing, second guessing.
Yeah. Even after you've already come to the
Oh,
decision. And
oh yeah, because let's make the torture last.
mhm. Yeah,
Oh gosh, that's so true. Is it successful for you? Do you find it a good barometer?
it is. And then when I don't follow it, I see in hindsight that I should have. So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I often wonder what separates the people who seem to make decisions so fast and quick and don't look in the rearview mirror from the ones who struggle like you and I. And for me, I have to go back to some of those earliest experiences
Mhm.
where self-trust was not affirmed or helped.
Mhm. Yeah, like probably way back to childhood when you're very little and someone would tell you how you felt versus
Oh,
asking you.
well, and we're doing that now with our kids.
Hmm.
I have a little kid's book called Be Brave, Little One, but honestly, it's like for everybody. But there's a line in there of, let's see, be brave to be with your feelings, each one, the happy and sad, the silly, the glum. And I talk to kids about, owning their feelings, but for parents too, so often when our kids say, I'm scared, I'm confused, I'm, fill in the blank, we rush to take that away. Oh, don't be scared. It's not that bad. It'll be fine. Well, I'm scared. Period. Exclamation point, probably. And it may work out, but in this moment, I'm terrified. And then what does that caring witness? What do we need from them? Well, can I go with you? Can I sit in the other room while you make that phone call? That's what we need. Not to talk us out of what is our true experience in the moment.
Yeah, or tell us it's not okay to feel how we feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this has been so great, Marianne. I have 2 closing questions for you. Before I
Yeah.
ask them, where can
Yeah.
the listeners go to learn more and to find your books?
Oh, well, gosh, my website is a great landing place because it has so much information. And that is just my name.com. So it's mariannerichmond.com. And Marianne is Marianne. Richmond is Richmond. Very long name. Richmond.com. Mariannerichmond.com. And you can see all my books I've written, both kids' books, my new memoir, tells you where you can order. It's really wherever books are sold. I've been fortunate to have vast distribution. So wherever people like to buy their books, they could find them.
Amazing. That will be in the description. And
Thank
my
you.
first question for you is, what is your number one health tip? So that could be emotional, spiritual, physical, mindset, just the one piece of advice that you would like everyone to know.
Oh gosh. Well, I did it this morning actually. I have a little bit of a ritual in the morning where I get up, I get my coffee, I go sit on the same corner of the couch that has a window, and I literally stare out the window for 5 minutes and do nothing. And I just notice like birds or grass or the rain, or I just sit there and notice. And then I read a page out of for me, I read Mark Nepo. I don't know if that name is familiar, but he's a poet philosopher. And he has a book called The Book of Awakening. And it's a daily read that just invites you into presence. And so for me, I read that. And then I feel like I can get on with my day. So it nurtures me into the day in a very slow way, because it used to be I would look at my phone and immediately be sucked into that. And I didn't like that feeling. So I've incorporated this little centering practice.
Kind of ease you into the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
My last question for you, you get to choose a number 1 through 100, and it will correlate to a personal question, as if none of our questions today have been personal.
Well, I know exactly the number because my favorite number is 22. I have it tattooed on my wrist, and it is no coincidence we are talking on the 22nd. I love this more than you know. So 22, of course.
Oh, I love that. Okay. 22. How do you stay resilient in the face of adversity?
I remind myself that I have many resources that I can draw on. Just from my own characteristics of tenacity and creativity and connectedness. I remind myself I have many resources I can bring to this situation. I am not helpless. I can feel helpless when I'm overwhelmed, but I come back and remind myself what I know, even when I don't know.
Thank you so much, everyone. Marianne Richmond, please check out the description, visit her website and all of her books that she's written. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. It was so lovely to get to talk to you.
Likewise, and truly the 22nd, I love that we're talking today.
Yeah, my number is 4, so I'm
Oh,
thinking
you're
2 and
4?
2. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 4 is another very powerful number.
Thank you so much, and
You're
I
welcome.
will talk to you soon.